ground. What are your tips for enjoying the experience without a campfire? In our second half hour, it is Pride Month. We'll be joined by two artists sharing their pride. And we're asking you, what is cause for celebration this Pride Month? And what are the ongoing challenges for the LGBTQ plus community? I'm Michelle Eliot. This is BC Today. As I mentioned, east of Port Alberni, the Cameron Bluffs wildfire continues to burn. And because of that, Highway 4 remains closed in both directions. It is the only major route out for people in that city. Well, CBC journalist Claire Palmer joins me now from Yubo, just south of Port Alberni. And Claire, tell us the latest on the Cameron Bluffs fire.
Well, the fire continues to burn, but firefighting efforts are coming along. Yesterday, we were up actually by Cameron Lake, and we got to see helicopters bucketing. There's also been planes flying overhead, and crews are working hard to get the blaze under control.
Okay. As I understand it, that fire does not pose a risk to structures or communities. But how is that highway closure affecting people?
So the detour from the highway closure is a challenging one, and it's definitely affecting the community in Port Alberni. It's affecting the supply chain. I spoke with a few grocers and gas stations this morning who say they've been affected with having the supply chain redirected south of the community. But officials are discouraging panic buying. Delivery trucks are still making their way into Port Alberni. They're just being rerouted, so they won't be completely shut off from supplies. But many people who commute between the Nanaimo area and Port Alberni are now stuck, as the detour adds an extra 4 hours to the drive. So non-essential travel is being discouraged.
Okay. How is that route working out? It's a smaller road, isn't it?
Yeah, so we are actually in Yubo right now, which is the start of the detour. It's predominantly on a gravel logging, dusty and hard to travel on. We're seeing plenty of cars coming out of it with just all coated in dust. There's also been reports of vehicle incidents along the road. Residents in Yubo are also asking travelers to please slow down and be mindful that they're not used to this level of traffic coming through the community. The ministry has also warned that this gravel route has narrow sections, sharp curves, and single-lane bridges. And there's also no cell reception, there's no gas stations or washrooms along the way.
Okay, I know we were trying to get a hold of you a few minutes ago, and you were saying cell reception certainly has been spotty, so it's good to speak with you right now. Do we know how long Highway 4 could be shut down?
So there's currently no timeline on when it'll open again because of slope instability and debris on the highway from the fire. The closure is actually likely to last longer than the fire itself. Once crews do get the all clear and that the area is stable and safe, they can get in there and they can start to work on repairing the highway and cleaning up debris.
Claire, thank you so much. We'll get more updates from you throughout the day, okay? Thanks so much for the time now.
Thank you.
That's CBC journalist Claire Palmer, who joined us from Yubo. And that's near where that alternate route has been set up for travel out of Port Alberni. But as you heard, the Ministry of Transportation saying just stick to vital transport, vital travel if you need to. It is 12:09 now, 1:09 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Michelle Eliot. Very nice to have you with us this afternoon. And in an effort to try and reduce that fire activity around the province, several campfire bans have just come into place this hour, and they will last until October. Category 1 bans will be in place for the Coastal, Kamloops, Prince George, and Caribou fire centers. Anyone caught with a traditional fire could be charged upwards of $100,000 and even face jail time. Category 2 and 3 fire bans have been in effect for most of the province since May. Now, propane campfires are still allowed, so there's something of note there for you. But we are asking you this half hour, how do you enjoy the camping experience without a campfire? And when you are outdoors, what are the other fire risks when it comes to human activity? We would like to hear from you. Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, on your cell phone, star or pound 690. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me for this conversation is Louise Peterson, the Executive Director for the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. Louise, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
What should people keep in mind after this campfire ban takes effect right now?
Yeah, it can come as no surprise to anybody that it has been necessary to put this campfire ban in effect. And as you said before, it'll last for a good number of months because it's just been so dry. Um, I think we all have to be prepared to kind of make some sacrifices, and probably, our camping experience as we move forward into the future is going to be a little different
Hmm.
than what we remember, like decades ago, because these dry, hot summers are just going to become more prevalent with climate change.
Have you found that people have been changing their behavior already over these last few years?
Yeah, I've just been keeping an eye out for, or ear out for, so like, the kind of comments that people have been making. I think some years ago it was like, oh, what a nuisance. But I think, we are just all recognizing, yeah, like it takes, sacrifices from all of us. And we do know that at least 50% of all wildfires tend to be caused by humans. I
Mm.
know in the States, it's actually that stat is it's 85% of wildfires that are caused by humans,
Wow.
but here it's more like 50. So whatever we can do to kind of take ourselves out of that equation, the better. So I think that's a great understanding of that. But we do need to kind of, as you sort of mentioned, we need to kind of redefine what that camping experience is going to look
Mm.
like. And campfires, have traditionally been this centerpiece, at our campsite. Like after like a long day of swimming or hiking, we'll come back to the
Exactly.
campsite and
Roast
we'll
those
have
marshmallows. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. But luckily, there are other things that we can do. So as you also mentioned, propane campfires are still, or camp stoves are still allowed. We certainly have to kind of keep an eye out for that. That might change too if things become really extreme.
Right.
But at the moment, that's certainly an option. There are LED lanterns. We can think about maybe putting up, like, so I think it's just like it's the coziness, kind of recreating something that is, brings that coziness and the familiarity that we have. So LED, so like lanterns, a string of solar powered lights, that sort of thing. And if I guess if people have access to electricity, maybe because it does get a little cooler at night, maybe plugging in a little heater as well. But otherwise, I mean, let's bring back song and music and games.
You can still
That
do
can sort of
those. Yeah.
you can still do this. Tell some stories. Yeah.
Well, let's take some calls from people as well. We're talking about redefining camping without the campfire. Have you been doing that already in light of increasing wildfire risk in our province? And this hour, campfire bans do take effect in parts of British Columbia, most of BC, and we're asking you, what are your alternatives? Do you have any tips for having that campfire experience, the camping experience without that open fire? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Also asking you, what are the other risks when it comes to human activity that may cause wildfires as well? We're going to hear about ATVs and the risk from that in just a few moments. So we'd love to hear from you on that. As you heard, 50% of fires are human caused. So how can we avoid that? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. My guest, Louise Peterson from the Outdoor Rec Council of BC. Andy is calling us from South Surrey. Andy, go ahead. What are your thoughts on a campfire ban, and what are the alternatives?
I think it's great. We're just actually coming back from camping, my wife and I. Spent 3 nights, no campfire, didn't need it. It's beautiful out. And I've camped for 65 years, and I actually used to be an outdoor guide that cooked over a campfire. So to lose it, it's not a big deal if you're camping. Get a propane one, rent one if you need to cook your hot dogs and marshmallows for the kids. We've camped now with our grandkids for a number of years and always use the propane. I don't even bother with a wood campfire anymore.
Right.
One, it's really dangerous. And I've seen a ton of fires that people do not put out properly. Wildfires are awful. I mean, between that and smoking, I'd like to see a complete smoking ban in all provincial parks because, again, most people aren't responsible with their cigarette butts, and that can start a fire just as easily. But it's not a big deal. We've got alternatives, so if you're taking the kids, think ahead. That's all you have to do.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. And you make the point about smoking as well. That's something that I've heard of, from people, tossing the cigarette butts sort of carelessly. A lot of people took up camping over the pandemic, right, for the first time. So a lot of newbies out there. What are your tips then? What advice do you want to share when it comes to campfire safety?
Talk to people who've done it before. I mean, I've camped from, as I said, 65 years ago with my parents. And, it was never a big thing. The equipment is far better today, far superior, easier to use. And just talk to somebody who knows what's going on. And as I said, campfires are fun, but the number of accidents that are caused by them way outweighs what you don't have to have.
Yeah. What are your tips for properly putting out a campfire then?
Oh, you need a shovel and you need buckets of water. It has to be totally drenched, and then take the shovel, dig it out, put sand on it, pour more water on it. Do not leave until you virtually can touch the top of the sand and everything else, and it's cold and wet. Has to be put out 100%.
100%. Do not. You need to not see any embers at all.
Exactly.
Lit up.
And to do it properly, I would say a shovel's needed as well as lots of buckets of water.
Andy, really good to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Decades of experience there. It's 65 years. Louise Peterson, let me follow up with you on the proper way. I know there's a ban right now around BC, but for when people do go and the campfires are allowed, what is the proper way just to make sure people know how to put out a campfire?
Yeah, we're definitely making sure that the campfire is confined. There's no fuel sources around. And as Andy mentioned, like having lots of water, having a shovel on hand as well, making sure that you never leave it unattended, not for a moment. Things are really dry. And then making sure like when you do put it out, like making sure that it is cool to the touch. Yeah, so that there's like no embers at all. That can ignite, like fires.
We have a question here, again, taking your calls on this, asking you, what are your alternatives to campfires when it comes to recreating that camping experience, given campfire bans taking effect this hour in BC? I'd love to hear from you. Do you have advice to share, just like Andy? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. And Louise, I want to ask you more about the causes when it comes to those human-caused fires. Mark is emailing us. Are forest fires caused by campfires in regulated campgrounds, or are they mainly caused in the backcountry?
I don't know. I don't have access to those stats, but when we talk about human-caused wildfires, we actually talk about like fires that are caused by trains, and not just campers, not just recreationists.
Right.
It's really like all types of human-caused where humans are an element. So that would definitely be interesting just to kind of get some stats on that. But I mean, I guess it's anything from flicking that cigarette. We actually know that it can take around 20 minutes. From when you flick a cigarette, it smolders and then it catches on fire. That's an open flame. So between doing that and having like an open flame that's just ready to get going, so it doesn't take very long. The other thing is like if you bring something that is made out of glass into the backcountry or the front country too, like fires need three things. They need fuel, they need oxygen, which there's lots of, and they need some sort of ignition, something to ignite the flame too. So that can be, so that can also come from the sun, or it could be a piece of glass. So a piece of glass is actually hugely dangerous too. And then of course, I know that you're going to be talking about ATVs, but so like motorized recreation as well. That's another cause as well. But as Andy mentioned, like I don't think anybody is nobody's like out there to try and like there are a very small percentage of people who would ever do anything that that they know would knowingly kind of cause a wildfire. It is just something that happens by accident. But we need to make sure that we are not the cause of those accidents.
Reduce the risk. And Andrea Wright says, please remind folks campfires are banned. This talk of campfires and how to put them out makes it sound like as long as you put it out thoroughly, they are allowed, they are not. And that's true, Andrea. And I did mention that they are banned right now. A ban takes effect this hour. Category 1 bans will be in place for the coastal, Kamloops, Prince George, and Caribou fire centers. And as well, Category 2 and 3 fire bans have been in effect for most of the province for a few months now. So to make that clear that these campfire bans are in effect. Thank you very much for the reminder, Andrea. Let's take another call now as we talk about alternatives to campfire bans when you are having that camping experience. People have been redefining camping, perhaps, as we heard from Louise Peterson. So what does that mean for you? How do you recreate that experience without the campfire? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Patricia is joining us from Tassis. Hello, Patricia.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure thing.
I just wanted to say my experience. It was years ago when I was a younger woman, but I did a long canoe trip through Alberta, and we camped every night and made a cooking. And we ended up using a canned heat thing called sterno, which you can bring with you, and it makes a intense little small heat, and you can put the lid on it and put it out and take it for the next night if you're going to go multiple times. It's doesn't have the allure or the beauty of a campfire, but it does the job for cooking and heating up water or tea or making coffee or those kinds of things. So I want to recommend those as an alternative to having a campfire in these terribly dry times.
Absolutely.
We want to save our forests so that we can enjoy them and they can continue to produce the wonderful things that we have all over BC because we have such beautiful forests. So sterno works, and there's other canned heat kinds of alternatives to regular fire for cooking, and I encourage people to use them. They don't ruin the experience. They just make you have a decent meal in spite of having to make a campfire.
Yeah, Patricia, you make an important point there. So thanks for raising that option, the sterno, a little campfire in a can, and you can use it to cook. But yeah, the idea is to protect the forest, right? So thank you very much for your call.
Thank you.
You take care. That's Patricia joining us from Tassis. And Louise Peterson joins me now from the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC as we talk about the campfire ban that takes effect, new ones taking effect this hour in parts of BC. There have been other fire bans already in place since May. We have an email from Sheena in Victoria who writes, I gave up campfires years ago because they contribute to global warming, which is the reason that there are so many out of control wildfires. The forests are so dry. I still have lots of fun, and I'm happy to make that sacrifice to help the planet. Sheena, thank you very much for that. And Louise, people understand the rationale behind these bans, right? But is there ever any pushback?
Yeah, I mean, that can be, a lot of us kind of grew up with, the campfire being such a central element of the camping experience. But I just think that right now, where it's so in our face that, we've got fires roaring around us. We know that this is, that the summer is not looking good in terms of, what's going to be happening. So I have not, I do kind of keep an eye on those things. I've not noticed anything really. I'm hoping that maybe this can bring us back to, just like stargazing, just like putting something else into focus, and especially, like we know that going camping is such a great way to kind of build memories, also amongst adults, but also amongst kids. But there's just so many other ways that we can enjoy it, such as, using it as an opportunity to kind of stargaze. But yeah, maybe we just need to kind of start talking less about it, less about and more about all the other things that we can do together when we go camping.
Right. There's a bit of a lore around it, right? So that becomes the draw. And what is monitoring like? Are there rangers who kind of go around just to make sure that there are no fires in place?
Well, I mean, I guess if you are at a BC Parks campsite, certainly, there's usually, park operators. There's lots of other people too, who can keep an eye on things.
Sure.
If you are in the backcountry, if you're kind of camping somewhere in the bush, there's not. There are very few enforcement officers, and that is why it's really important that all of us kind of keep an eye on like help spot fire, so, and also like just keeping an eye out on whether we all like doing what we're supposed to. I mean, as I said before, I don't think anybody's really kind of trying to break the law. It might just be that somebody is didn't know that this camp banned. So it's like, tap this person on the shoulder and let them know that this is happening. But I think it's really up to all of us to make sure that it just kind of monitoring and of course like calling in too, if we do spot a fire, and you'll probably provide that number at the end, but otherwise it's *5555 on your cell phone.
*5555 on your cell phone. Louise, always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much. That's Louise Peterson, the Executive Director of the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. Couple of emails now. Carol Ann writes, early this week near where I live, the volunteer fire department was called out to put out a smoldering campfire in the woods. The homeowners put it out last night, they thought, but it reignited and roots were burning a few feet into the ground. Doesn't take much when it's this dry. And Jay writes, the province has multiple fires going. Millions of dollars are being spent to fight them. People are displaced. Homes are getting burnt. The want of a campfire is selfish. Not having a campfire is not a hardship. It is considerate. Thank you very much for those emails. bctoday@cbc.ca is our address. It's now 27 minutes past the hour, and one other risk for wildfires, perhaps lesser known, is off-road vehicles like ATVs. For more on this, we're joined now by Chris De Silva, who's president of the Quad Riders Association of BC, also known as ATV BC. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Well, tell us more about this risk from ATVs. How can they cause sparks that creates a risk for wildfire?
Well, ATVs actually are reasonably safe out in the bush, providing certain, rules are followed. And we try to educate all of our members. We are an organization that has 5,000 members throughout the province. Having said that, there are a lot more ATVs out there and people who ride them who are not actually part of our organization. But we try to reach out to them, just like we do to our members, through education and through social media. Now,
and what are the ways to reduce risk then? If people, you're saying people still can go, is it an option to just not for now?
Well, what we try to do, right now the conditions are dry, and we do ask our members to monitor the conditions, and to use their common sense. And if they are especially dry, then stay out of the backcountry because there is the potential for fires. Now, having said that, all ATVs, especially the newer models, come with what they call spark arresters. And this minimizes the chances of sparks or coming from the exhaust, causing ignitions out in the bush. And the older machines are required under law to also have spark arresters mounted on their machines. And we do, if we hear of people who have older machines, we say to them, check and make sure that you do have a spark arrestor on your machine. The other things that we encourage our members to do is to be prepared. And many of us carry fire extinguishers and buckets so we can, put water on fires if we need to, and a shovel so that you can help douse the fires. And every once in a while, you'll come across somebody who's left the fire burning. We came just recently, it was last year, we were out riding and we came across a campfire that somebody had abandoned, and the closest water supply we had was a puddle. But we got the fire out and
Okay. So there's that role for you as well. So what would be just a bit of advice from you then for people who do ride ATVs? As you say, there's a point when perhaps you just don't go because it's dry. But what's the last bit of advice you'd like to leave us with?
I would say, first of all, people who smoke, do not smoke when you're out riding. Cigarette butts are one of the biggest causes of fires everywhere. So we encourage people not to smoke. Stay on the trails because they're usually well worn and away from grasses and brush and things like that. Again, abide by closures for campfires and similar issues. And again, as I said, stay out of the backcountry when the conditions are especially dry, and use your common sense.
That's a good note to end on, Chris. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Chris De Silva is president of the Quad Riders Association of BC. That's also known as ATV BC. It is 12:30 now, 1:30 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Michelle Eliot. We do have some exciting news to share with you as well. Starting this coming Monday, June 12th, our program BC Today will be available as a TV show via live stream. So we'll be launching a video version of BC Today. You can find it on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC. and on our CBC Vancouver YouTube channel. Of course, you can still listen to the CBC Listen app. That's every weekday starting at 12:05, right after the noon news. This has been in the works for many months now. You may have heard us talk about it a little bit here on the program. We're so excited to have our listeners watch us as well. Really exciting news. So that starts Monday here on BC Today. And when you watch us on our live stream program, you'll also get to watch Rob Zimmerman with the CBC News. Here he is now.
Good afternoon. BC's fire commissioner says the number of people who have died in fires in homes and other structures has tripled in the last 3 years. The commissioner says working smoke alarms were present in just 45% of residential fires. The report says the deaths are overrepresented by youth and those over 65. The RCMP have arrested a woman after shots were fired on a rural property in Kelowna. The Mounties used its emergency response team and a police service dog to secure the area. The woman, who is known to police, was arrested without any further incident. And there's still no word on when Highway 4 on Vancouver Island will reopen. It's been closed since Tuesday as a wildfire moves closer. There is a detour on unpaved roads to and from Port Alberni, but the province is asking people to use that route for essential travel only. And now taking a look at the forecast, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon on the north coast with a high of 18, highs reaching 28 with widespread smoke in the Peace. In the central interior, sunny with a high of 31. Highs up to 32 with a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 32 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, mainly sunny this afternoon, hazy in some areas with highs reaching 27 inland. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Thank you very much, Rob. Perhaps starting Monday, we can wave at each other since people will be able to watch us.
Yes, I think we should think about maybe doing that.
Yes, and we can
be great.
Coordinate as well. I'm wearing blue today, and you're wearing
I saw
pink.
your blue shirt. I actually saw your shirt today, and it's a lovely blue.
Oh, thank you. And yours is a lovely pink.
Well, thank
so
you.
we can.
Hang on. I've got matching socks.
There it is. Yeah, a little bit deeper.
Can you see that?
More, yes, I did. More fuchsia,
it is.
I think.
It is. You're right, but close. I know. I was thinking, is it too close or not close enough?
Yeah. Do you want to match or
think?
coordinate, right? It's sometimes...
I'm open to either, really.
We're going to have to be much more conscious of our outfits starting Monday. No more sweatpants for me.
Yeah, and I guess the hoodies are out for me.
Yeah, hoodies are out.
No more hoodies.
But you can,
That's half my wardrobe.
I know, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
But as long as you have matching, coordinated outfits, coordinated socks and hoodies, maybe that's okay.
Sure.
We'll allow it.
Thank you.
Rob, thanks so much.
All
Robert
right, Michelle.
Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You can hear him at noon and 12:30 here on BC Today. Starting Monday, you'll be able to see him as well as we live stream on GEM, CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, as well as on the CBC Vancouver YouTube channel. 12:34 now, 1:34 in the Mountain Time Zone. Well, it is National Indigenous History Month, and North America's premier festival to celebrate Indigenous arts is taking place this week. Award-winning author Michelle Good will be launching her new book of essays this evening. It's called Truth Telling: 7 Conversations about Indigenous Life in Canada. Well, this morning she spoke to the CBC's Stephen Quinn on the early edition.
People think, well, then there was the residential schools. But prior to that, there were all kinds of things that were occurring that were designed to terminate Indigenous populations in Canada, to clear the plains, so to speak, to allow for non-Indigenous settlement. So there were things like farming policies like Sir John A. Macdonald and his policy of submission based on starvation. All manner. The 60 Scoop that had its genesis really in the residential school policy. One of the very good examples is in the essay $13.69 that deals with the Adopt Indian and Métis program, where we saw little children's photographs in newspapers in Saskatchewan in the 70s as though they were for sale, like a patio furniture set or a puppy.
Yeah, I have seen those advertisements firsthand and I mean, it's unbelievable when you look at it. You can't, in modern perspective, you just can't believe that ever happened.
Well, that's correct.
Yeah.
And that's what I seek to do with this book, is to engage in a conversational as opposed to a confrontational approach and say, here in a very simple way, but well-researched way, is some of the realities that Indigenous people have had to live with. So let's broaden the conversation we've been having, look at some of those things, and look at how we can engage meaningfully together as non-Indigenous and Indigenous people towards substantive reconciliation.
That was award-winning author Michelle Good, author of Truth-Telling: 7 Conversations About Indigenous Life in Canada. That's her new book. And of course, her award-winning book, 5 Little Indians, was one of the most powerful books I read last year, certainly. It is 12:36, 1:36 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1. Well, June is Pride Month, a time to celebrate 2SLGBTQ stories, communities, and experiences, and a reminder to educate ourselves on community and allyship. This half hour, we will be joined by 2 artists, and we want to hear from you as well. How are you celebrating this Pride Month? And what are the challenges still when it comes to 2SLGBTQ plus rights? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. I have 2 guests joining me now. Fanny Kearse is a poet and storyteller, and Preston Buffalo is an interdisciplinary artist. Really good to have you both. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Happy Pride Month.
Thank you.
Fanny, I'll start with you. You have a new book coming out.
Yes.
And it's called Umi's Prayer, and it's poetry and prose from a year living and loving queer. Tell me about the inspiration for that.
Yeah, the inspiration for Umi's Prayer came from the liberation that I felt in claiming my queerness and claiming my queer and Black identity. And it's really a love letter to claiming who you are, to the land, to community and people, and to just being held in safe space.
I can see you just brighten up as you
thank you.
What was that experience like for you, that journey?
Yeah, it was so interesting. I'm originally and proudly from Treaty 4 territory, and I've lived in Vancouver, in so-called Vancouver, for just over 2 years now. And so it really did feel like a journey. And the book is set up in 4 sections, like the 4 seasons of the year. So it really feels just like this momentous experience of identity reclamation.
And what do you hope readers take away from it?
I hope that they feel inspired to just dream their dreams, whatever that looks like, whether that looks like just actually reconnecting with those dreams and journaling about them, or getting out there and making them happen. And I hope that it's a love letter to each person reading it to just be their truest, most authentic selves.
Now, Preston, to you now, your upcoming exhibit is called Cosmic Connections, a queer Indigenous astronomy. How does your identity as a two-spirit person influence your art?
It's about sharing the kind of not really told stories of the two-spirited people. And the creation stories is what I'm trying to represent in my show coming up.
Tell us about that. What do you want to share about those creation stories?
Just the oral traditional story about how we came from the stars and yeah, about that.
It sounds like they mean a lot to you.
They do, yeah. And I mean, growing up displaced, I wasn't really raised on a reserve, so it's stories that have been told only recently to me. And,
is that right? How did that come about?
My just reconnection with my family back in Alberta, the Treaty 6 territory.
What was it like to finally hear those stories that you didn't learn as a child?
It felt like a bit more like I felt where I could see where I came from. Where I didn't really understand, I just felt like in between both worlds and not really fitting into either one.
It sounds so similar to what you were talking about, right? Being true to your authentic self. What role does art play in that? What does being able to express yourself through art do for that connection with yourself?
I think for me personally, it's one of my biggest tools for healing. It's a space that I can create to hold space for myself, to unpack a lot of things and unpack a lot of narratives that we've been told and sold on that aren't necessarily true about how we're living our lives or how we're supposed to live our lives. And it feels like when I am making space for my art and that creation, that I am in communion with my highest self, and I'm in communion with my ancestors, and it is a prayer for peace, really, is what I feel like my art practice is when I'm doing it personally for myself.
What's it like for you, Preston?
Sort of too. Like there are things that I can't really express with words. I find it's much easier for me to express visually.
Yeah, I bet, and it just comes out and pours out of you, I'm sure.
Yeah, it does. Definitely.
What does it mean to be part of the artist community? What does that bring for you?
I think for me, it brings liberation. It's this community that I always dreamed of being a part of when I was a little girl. And, I think, especially as little girls, and sometimes these narratives that are placed on femme presenting people about what our dreams look like. Mine were about being in community and having these moments of connection with people. And so when I'm within the artist community, and I don't know if it's resonant for you, Preston, but I see so much of myself in other people. I see my ancestors' stories, I see my past, I see my future, I see my present, and it's just this sacred gift being within the artist community here.
Expanding on that too, I feel the same way. I finally felt like these are my people.
Yeah.
That's where I belonged.
Yeah. You see yourself in others as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's what it means to be part of a community, isn't it? Just really love having you both on the program today. And we are taking some calls as well. I'm joined by Fanny Kears, a poet and storyteller, as well as Preston Buffalo, an interdisciplinary artist. And June is Pride Month. So this is a time to celebrate those stories within the 2SLGBTQ plus community, and as well to educate ourselves as allies too. So we're asking you, how are you celebrating Pride Month? And as the challenges continue for the community, what do you see as the biggest challenges right now? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, star or pound 690. If you'd like to send us an email, as we've been hearing, perhaps sometimes it's different formats, right? In which you like to express yourself, you can also email us too. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. I'd like to ask you both, Preston and Fanny, what you do see as challenges right now for the community?
I mean, definitely with it's not really like a core West End community anymore. It's often so decentralized with housing and all that stuff.
Yes.
It's a lot of, there's not a physical community like there used to be.
Right. What challenge does that pose?
A sense of connection with each other, and just like walking around and seeing the community around your neighborhood. Like if you lived in the West End 20 years ago, you felt it.
Yeah, and that's been dispersed, you think?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you reach out? How do you create connection then when that's the case?
I mean, it's more digital now, I find.
Right,
I mean, definitely.
right.
I mean, my work is digital partially and it's physical as well. So I think that's a way for me to share my story.
Yeah. That creates opportunity, doesn't it?
And more reach that way too.
What an interesting point. And what about for you, Fanny?
I think one of the challenges that I see within the artisan community, specifically within the intersection of the queer arts community, is just in valuing our worth and others valuing our worth, making sure that we're not being tokenized or exploited. I think that we have these conversations a lot with Pride Month with different corporations, different organizations, both globally and locally. like using the flag and using our faces to make money when we're not actually investing back in the community. There's a huge housing crisis going on right now in Vancouver. And a lot of the queer folks that I know who are artists, who are independently employed, who are out there hustling, getting gig work, it's not sustainable to live in this city. And so it's like pushing that community further out. It's dispersing it, as Preston mentioned. Yeah, and so it makes it, it just makes it harder when we're decentralized. So I think that that's just one of the challenges. I think that we're feeling ripple effects of drag story bans and those sorts of things, trans rights.
Speaking of that, we have an email from Kyla who writes, as a parent and ally of a gender creative child, I was so disappointed last week when our elementary school canceled a drag story time event due to backlash from some parents at the school and the organization presenting the event feeling unsafe. It raised the need for Victoria's schools, administrators, and teachers to go further in the classrooms and schools' communities to combat homophobia and transphobia. On a positive note, my child is attending a community event soon for trans and gender nonconforming youth. It's called the Gender Generations Project. So there are bright lights within the struggle. Kyla, thank you very much for that email. And what a story. And these are stories that we've been hearing about, right? When it comes to drag story times, the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was talking about just today about the challenges for youth. What do you see as challenges that young people face?
Well, I wonder if the discrimination, this hate, ever went away, or if it was just hidden this whole time, and if it's a resurgence of it, or like if it was always there bubbling on the surface.
Okay, and do you see it as important to talk about it then?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure, I do.
Yeah, I think one really interesting thing I notice about being with the youth right now as I facilitate poetry workshops is that a lot of them do have the language and the verbiage, but then when they are met with a teacher or another parent who diminishes that or disregards that, then there becomes this friction. And so I think that it's a challenge with youth, is still this idea and this narrative that youth are to be seen and not heard, and they know what's going on. They can advocate for themselves, and we need to listen to them and respect them.
And there is, I mean, from what I see from my kids as well, in terms of the conversations with their friends, it is very much just accepted from my observation when it comes to how they talk to each other and how they describe each other and accept each other. So there is that as well. I hope people can take some heart from that. Asking you, how are you celebrating Pride Month, and what do you think are the challenges still for the 2S LGBTQ+ community? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. I'd love to hear from you on that as well. And we know that there are events. You were talking about this a little bit earlier, Fanny, is you see the big events, right? The parades and all of that. How do we ensure that that they stay authentic, that the message is there, they don't become sort of watered down? Just because, or tokenized, I think is what you were saying.
Yeah, I think it can be hard because, we have now made Pride such a celebration, and it is, but I think it's just really having these conversations, and, you can still be celebratory, you can still be dancing and still be sparkly and still be talking about real things.
Right, just go beyond it, perhaps.
Yeah.
What about for you, Preston?
I mean, I think back like when I first moved to Vancouver, I was in the parade many times, and one year it was for the Bay, and their float was a silver canoe going down, and I was like, think about it, that could never happen today. Like at the time, we had no idea really.
Yeah. How far do you think we have come then in being actually authentic? Yeah.
I don't think they would. I think far enough that they would not do that today.
Right. Yeah. What are the lessons do you think we have learned? Let's maybe take a positive note there too.
Just a broader acceptance of what is actually out there, and more, people learning the language of how to refer to people, and all that.
Language is so important, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a call now. Emily is joining us from Kamloops. Hi, Emily. What do you want to say about 2S LGBTQ+ rights?
Hi. What I want to say is that there definitely seems to be a lot more negativity this year. It's been on the rise, especially since COVID, and there's a lot more misinformation, and that's the key that's out there is like that. A lot of these far right movements are spreading outright lies, and it's really affecting, and people who don't really have a connection to the LGBTQ community are more inclined to believe these things, just as they don't really know the truth, unfortunately. And it does seem to be getting better within the younger generation. I see Generation Z and even younger. The millennials are much better as well, but I think it's just this rampant misinformation campaign that's being put out against us, and it's very bad in the States. There's a huge amounts of transphobia with all these bills against, especially trans kids, but they're not just against trans kids. It's a greater issue that they're just trying to basically put everybody who is queer back in the closet and to not be seen.
What do you think is the role for allies?
The role for allies is huge right now, that if they see something online, or if they hear or see something in person, like in their workplace, just to step up and speak out against it. And that's because we're such a small community. We need the greater community to help us out, basically.
You mentioned, Emily, bills in the United States. What do you think leaders need to do then, beyond words?
Leaders need to, if they're not educated about the issues, then they need to be educated about the issues. And basically just to speak to the community and try to understand us and to understand the LGBTQ issues out there. We are seeing it spread to Canada, like the PPC has put out anti-trans rhetoric. The Conservatives, it's not as rampant in there, but it's definitely in their party. And it's probably in like other, in a smaller scale within other parties as well. But in general, it's not their, like the NDP and the Liberals, it's not in their mandate to, they're generally try to protect us. But it is in Canada, and it is getting worse. We are seeing it against the protests against drag shows, and we've seen even in Kamloops here, flags that have been destroyed or stolen, or I just don't. I even see in the store, some of the stores that used to have Pride Month paraphernalia like flags and things. It's not there.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really important to hear from you. You've shared so much today, Emily. Thank you very much for calling.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah. Well, happy Pride Month to you, okay? That's Emily joining us from Kamloops, sharing a lot there, right? That these flags that at stores, that you don't see them right now. So there has been that as they call
Diminished
it,
kind of
that misinformation. Go ahead.
Well, in Vancouver, I heard the parade in Vancouver, I heard the route has been diminished as well. Like we're seeing that here.
What do you think is needed to combat that tide?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because it's, I think a lot of people, I don't know if this is resonant at all for you, President, but a lot of people are like, well, it's about hate. But I don't really think that it's about hate, it's about fear. And then we go back to the knowledge part of it, that it's about education, it's about knowledge sharing, it's about storytelling, it's about holding community.
Well, on that note, why don't you tell us both about your events and your exhibits, Preston?
Mine's an augmented reality exhibit. It's at the Roundhouse in Yaletown, and it's just kind of showing. It's basically like a animation of like the star cluster that we came from, and showing that. Yeah.
The story that you have learned.
Yeah, exactly, from the elders that I know, and
And Fanny, what about you?
I am having my book release party later this month, so that will be on June 25th. At Art Speak Gallery in Gastown from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And it will feature readings from myself and my book, obviously, and then feature a lot of other amazing humans who exist at the intersections of being queer and trans and BIPOC. And so they'll feature performances from Anna Santos, Adonis King Critter, Dee Fretter, and Keenan Marchant.
And radiance.
Yes, yes. It'll be a radiant evening, full of joy.
Everybody, that's right. They both sound very exciting and, of course, very meaningful as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
very
you.
nice to have
Thank you for having us. It was nice to meet you, Preston.
Easy.
Fanny Kerr is a poet and storyteller, and Preston Buffalo is an interdisciplinary artist. It is 12:55 now, 1:55 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1. Well, a new plus-size clothing swap offers Vancouverites free second-hand clothing, sizes 14 and up. Organizers say they want to create a welcoming community for those who are often excluded from the fashion industry. Take a listen here.
Yeah, so what we're doing here is we're doing a clothing swap. This is a swap specifically for people who are sizes 14 and up. This is our first one. We've actually gotten a lot of really good engagement on Instagram. A lot of people reaching out, just saying like, it's really great to see this kind of space in Vancouver. Vancouver tends to be very small sizes, and it's hard to find plus size clothing for people in our community. The goal here is to be able to provide affordable clothing for people who are plus size. The issues we find in the plus size community is that we're all different shapes and sizes, and it's hard to find clothing that fits.
So it's impossible to find, not impossible, very hard to find plus size clothes in thrift stores, and the ones that are there are taken by people who are smaller bodied and used to like upcycle into something bigger, and so they'll take the bigger clothes to make themselves something tailored, and so we're left with hardly anything. And then the stores that we do have are really expensive, so yeah, it's hard to find anything. And especially if you're a bigger fat person, so I'm like a medium fat person, if you're bigger, then it's impossible. Oh my God, look at this. Brand new with tags. Obviously it looks amazing on me, right? Do I look fabulous or what?
Lovely story there. It is now 12:57, just about to end our show. That is it for BC Today this afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone who called in. Thanks to Emily and Kamloops as well. Love to hear from you on email. You can always send us your thoughts, bctoday@cbc.ca. You can also download our podcast anytime, and that's on the CBC Listen app. And yes, do join us Monday on the program. You can still listen to us on the radio and on the CBC Listen app, but as well, starting Monday, June 12th, BC Today will be available as a TV show via live stream. And so we are launching a video version of BC Today. You can watch us online live on the CBC Gem live stream service, cbc.ca/BC, our website, as well as on the CBC Vancouver YouTube channel. And still listen to us as well anytime on the CBC Listen app. Stay tuned to more news on the wildfire, the Cameron Bluff wildfire that has shut down Highway 4 on Vancouver Island. We'll hear more about that throughout the day, and about the firefighting efforts and how far they are coming along there. Our reporter, of course, you heard her earlier, Claire Palmer, joining us from UBO. More on that throughout the day here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you for listening to BC Today.